ensure adequate water flow and surface agitation. Now, first we'll talk about surface agitation. Surface agitation is absolutely crucial because oxygen is one of the absolute most important things to this aquarium. Now, when your pumps, when your filter is blowing out the water, I want you to remember that the water in the filter is releasing is often, you can consider an oxygen deficit because the water's been through the filter. The filter is full of bacteria. The bacteria is sucking all of the oxygen out of the water. Then the water gets returned to the aquarium again. So therefore, let's say that you're aiming for an oxygen level of say 7 as a minimum in your aquarium. The water then goes through the filter. There's so much bacteria using all of the oxygen. There might be some stuff decaying in the water in the filter as well, which is all using the oxygen. Then the water might actually come out of the filter at say 3 or 4 parts per million. So do never consider the filter itself as a source of oxygen because the filter actually sucks your oxygen. So you're trying to agitate your surface as much as you can, and you really want the whole surface of your aquarium to be well and truly agitated because you need to be breaking the water surface in order to allow the oxygen. The diffusion does not occur on a still surface. So if you look at the top of your aquarium and any part of it still, it creates what's called a laminar layer and gas does not exchange. The same as if there's like a pond outside and it goes rampant green with algae, it basically goes dead because the gas does not actually exchange and it really doesn't allow life. Whereas if you've got a river or an ocean or whatever, which well and truly that laminar layer is getting broken up, the gas exchange then occurs, the CO2 is able to escape, the oxygen is able to become nice and rich. So making sure you have adequate surface agitation is really, really important. You're aiming for the whole top of your aquarium to be well and truly agitated. Now some common myths. Air stones. People put air stones in their aquarium for the bubbles. The bubble only oxygenates the water when it pops. So therefore, if you have a pump that's blowing the water and this whole area here is fully breaking, the pump will actually create a lot more oxygen than the bubbles. Because the bubbles, though it looks like they're oxygenating the hell out of the water, it might just be breaking a bit of water at the top. The next thing is, as a general recommendation, I want about 14 times an hour water flow in a reef aquarium. So therefore, with that amount of flow going on in the aquarium, if you have bubbles, they usually, by the time they find their way to the surface, they've created micro bubbles and your aquarium is quite milky. The other thing the bubbles do is pop and fling salt out all over the roof. And so the bubbles can be a bit of a nuisance, so be very careful using bubbles to oxygenate. So that's called vertical distribution of oxygen, and your pumps are horizontal distribution of oxygen. So we really want to encourage the pumps as the most important thing. Now the next thing I want to talk to you about is countercurrents. If you have enough water flow in your aquarium, countercurrents are excellent. Countercurrent means you've got a pump here and a pump there and they're shooting against each other, so they create a countercurrent. If you have lots and lots of water flow and you can afford the countercurrent, that's great. But in most cases, people are lucky to have 14 times an hour water flow. So what we're trying to do is create kinetic energy. So the way that you create kinetic energy, which means you're using movement to create energy. So if you have your aquarium set up, like for example this one that's behind me, where all the jets are at the top, all the jets are shooting across the top, all the jets are creating maximum surface agitation, and all of the water is going in this sort of fashion. So the water gets straight across the top where it's heavily oxygenated, then it goes straight down the front glass, which doesn't bother anything, then it goes back into the reef totally full of oxygen. So therefore when it's in the back, and hopefully you've got your caves built really well elevated and really porous so the water can get in there, and providing the water can get into the back of the reef full of oxygen, then any of your nutrients and organics that accumulate in the back of your aquarium bond with oxygen and will then come up. Now what the problem is with countercurrents is you have a pump here and a pump here, and they're shooting against each other. So straight away, you're creating a countercurrent, which is actually losing kinetic energy. So therefore, your pumps are shooting like that, and then as soon as you turn off your pumps, they're fighting each other, so your water will stop quite quickly compared to the other one. Because this one, you turn off your pumps, and you'll see the water still flowing for a long time, even though your pumps are off, until it actually stops. Whereas this one, the water's actually fighting itself, and then it stops much quicker. The other thing about blowing your pumps this way is when you blow your pump straight across the reef, you find heaps of your corals just close up. Because your pumps here, it's shooting straight across the reef, and every coral on this side's doing this, and every coral on that side's doing that. So that's one of the benefits of positioning the corals the way they are, like putting the pumps the way they are. Now, I see designs all the time about people that got all these pumps down the back of their aquarium. And they go, oh, that'll be blowing out my float, that'll be blowing all the garbage out of the back of the tank. The idea is excellent, but I just don't think it actually works. Because so often, the people who've got their pumps down the back, I say to them, all right, do this for me, turn them off. And then come and see me in 3 months, or 2 months, or whatever, and let me know what effect that had on the aquarium. And almost always has absolutely no effect whatsoever. Because the pump down the back is creating a countercurrent, which we're not encouraging anyway, and it's blowing the water around under the water, which we're not encouraging anyway. We want all of our water flow occurring across the surface, so that's getting us our agitation. So that's making the water rich in oxygen, and it's creating that kinetic energy. Does that make sense? So now next thing I want to talk about is adequate water flow. So the point is ensure adequate water flow and surface agitation. So we understand surface agitation, we understand we want the whole surface to be agitated. And remember how I was saying before about lighting, that it's basically just a game. It's basically, some corals like lots of light, lots of water flow, other corals don't need so much water flow. And once again, that book by Julian Sprung will have the recommendations in there for you. And regardless of those recommendations, you're still going to be doing the 3-week test. So you're doing the 3-week test in reference to water flow, and you're doing the 3-week test in reference to light. So you're just basically putting the coral in the aquarium, and it's quite simple. You watch it, and you get a good idea of what the coral's supposed to be doing, and if it's not doing that, we need to figure out why it's not doing that. So water flow, a great thing. If there's not enough water flow in the aquarium, what's the corals going to be doing? They're probably going to be doing this. And if there's too much water flow in the aquarium, corals are going to be doing this. So you basically just have to be watching them and look at the way they're opening. Do you want to come and grab a seat, guys? There's plenty up here. Barge through if you want. And hey, Joy, can you organise some seats for them? There's just some spare chairs just over here. Okay, so once again, we're looking at the aquarium as a game. And we're playing the game. We're thinking of it like a big jigsaw puzzle. And each coral is a different piece of the puzzle. And we're remembering that there's no such thing as right or wrong. There's just what you see and how you react to what you see. So we put the coral in. If the coral looks like it's moving and swaying nicely, then that's great. If we're worried about too much sediment building up on the coral and the coral is not looking like it has enough water flow, because water flow is very important to the coral. The water flow is going to get away their excrement, their waste. The water flow is going to bring them oxygen. The water flow is going to bring them nutrients. So the water flow is very important. So once again, as a guide, 14 times an hour water flow. So you work out how many litres in your tank, and then you look at how many pumps you've got and what they're shooting per hour, and you can work out approximately 14 times. And I find if you get it around there, you can't go wrong. So providing you've got that much flow, you're using kinetic energy, you're not blowing across the face of the reef, then you will find good positions for almost any type of coral in your aquarium. So any more water flow questions, guys? Yep.
So does it mean you will never put pumps in the middle or in the lower layer of the tank? You would always put a sticker up.
So let's say there's no such thing as never, because by all means you can do it. But what I'm suggesting to you is that, in my experience, it's nowhere near as beneficial. So if we put the pumps along the top aiming forward, my reasons behind that is, number one, you're not blowing across the reef, which is going to cause you problems. and you're taking advantage of kinetic energy. So therefore your water flow is moving on itself. Now if you put a pump in the bottom or in the middle of the aquarium and it's shooting that way, you're very much losing most of that kinetic energy. Because if you're trying to get the water to move on itself, you need the pumps to work to allow it to move on itself. And remember, there's not a right or wrong way. So I'm not telling you for 1 second that don't have a pump down the bottom, because it's fine if you do. But I'm just telling you that in most of the experiments that I've actually done, I've done it a lot of times now where I just switch them off, and it makes no difference to the actual aquarium itself, providing that there's 14 times an hour along the top of the aquarium. So I don't believe that a pump down the bottom is anywhere near as valuable as a pump up the top. The pump at the top is what's creating a gas exchange. The pump up the top is what is allowing your kinetic energy, and so forth. That make sense? Any other questions, guys? Yep.
Is there any formula that you have for the number of pumps for the size of tank?
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. Because basically at the end of the day I want 14 times an hour flow. So if you're getting 14 times an hour through one pump, then that's okay, but it just means that you're going to have to, number one, make sure your water level is high enough, is low enough to accept that much volume in one spot. And then it's a matter of positioning your corals according to the flow that you're actually offering, which usually would not be a good idea. Also remember that when you've got a pump at the bottom, you're probably going to lose 30% of its flow pumping up to the top of the aquarium, and you're probably going to lose a lot more, if not another 30% of it actually pumping in by the time it goes around elbows and so forth. So you can often say a pump down the bottom might be delivering 2/3 or a half of the flow, depending on the pump, actually to the surface. And remember that some pumps are designed for water flow, so therefore they're designed to be in a fish tank shooting water, and other pumps are designed to have torque, so they're designed to have head height, so they're better water pumps. Because there's some pumps are power heads, other pumps are water pumps. They're good for the sumps. And there's all these other fancy devices like wave makers. Wave makers are wonderful. They're awesome looking elements. But my only problem is everyone I've ever been involved in always breaks down. So one day someone will create a wave maker that can do this with your corals that doesn't cost $1,000 and doesn't break down all the time. And it will be a hit because they're absolutely wonderful. Then in regards to creating purposed countercurrents, which means tidal action or counter flows where the water goes this way for, say, an hour or so, then it moves back and goes the other way for an hour or so. That's absolutely wonderful to do that, but you need to remember that what I'm asking for is 14 times an hour in one direction and 14 times an hour in the other direction, which is very, very rarely offered. So in a perfect world, I tell everyone to do that. But I mean, otherwise you'll probably have a tank half full of pumps to actually achieve that. But what other questions have we got, guys? Right, so we're all comfortable with water flow? So basically, all I'm telling you is very simple. Ensure adequate water flow and surface agitation. So you just got to make sure the corals have the right amount of water flow for the corals that you have. You just make sure that there's adequate light for the corals that you have, and it's pretty much that simple.